Welcome to the Psychedelics Past, Present, Future webinar series organized by the Center for Access to Information and Justice at U Winnipeg. The Center for Access to Information and Justice focuses on public interest research. Uh, I want to start by acknowledging that the University of Winnipeg is located on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I acknowledge that our water in Winnipeg is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. Thanks to the UW event team and the media team for working on this webinar series. Here's the format for today. We have about 60 minutes or a few more. We have our speaker. We have questions from the audience. You can put your questions into the Q&A tab, and John or I will take them. So today's speaker, John Gilchrist, is the communications manager at TheraPsil, a grassroots nonprofit organization working to legalize psychedelic therapy in Canada. A supporter of drug policy reform, John believes in the growing acceptance of psychedelics and psychedelic therapy, that it can mark a paradigm shift in the treatment of mental health. John has also played an integral role in TheraPsil's advocacy work, contributing to national and international campaigns, media coverage, and has led lobbying initiatives in Ottawa to advance psychedelic therapy legalization. Thanks very much, John, for being here today, and I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and for having me. I'm super excited to be talking to you folks about this. It's just amazing to me that I'm here talking to folks at a university about psychedelics and psychedelic therapy. This series is really wonderful, and it's a real privilege for me. So just wanted to say that, and I will share my screen and we'll jump right into it. Okay, so apologies. I know you folks can see the top of the screen, which says Chrome and presentation and all that. Just some tech difficulties on my side, but if you folks can see everything all right, then I'll just kind of get right into it. So, yes, so my name is John. I'm the communications director at TheraPsil. So we'll get into more details about what TheraPsil does and our work in a bit, but I just want to say thank you again for having me. I feel like looking at the past list of speakers that have spoken in this series, I feel like Robin at like a Batman convention or something like that. But I hope that I will at least match some of the folks' presentations from the past here. But I'm just here as a passionate storyteller and a drug policy reform advocate, and just really, again, so excited to be talking with you all. So a bit of a declaration. I have no conflicts of interest to declare. I work for TheraPsil. We're a nonprofit organization. We have received donations in the past from organizations working in the psychedelic space, as well as generous community donors. However, these do not influence or dictate our work in any way. I will, however, declare that I might swear once or twice in this presentation, talking about psychedelics and the lack of access in Canada and the legal systems in place definitely get me a bit riled up, but I will try my best to keep it clean. And another really quick declaration. To be clear, in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about Health Canada and like the systems in place here that I don't think are fair towards Canadians and healthcare professionals. But I've got nothing against Health Canada. Shout out to my friends who work at Health Canada. My suggestions here are really aimed directly at the leaders in place in charge of these things in Canada. So this is our current health minister, Kamal Khera, as well as our prime minister. I just think it's about time that these folks jumped on board and aligned with science. That's all I'm going to say on that. So why are we here today? Because there's a real unmet need. Patients are suffering, and we have the knowledge and tools to offer them meaningful relief. We're also here because patients deserve more than politics. The current policy surrounding psychedelic therapy block compassionate science-based access and care for those in need, and we need to push for a paradigm shift where medical decisions are made by medical people, not by bureaucrats. Why else are we here? Because it's amazing like that folks like yourself are out here to learn a little bit more about this. We need education to achieve change. I think, I hope to achieve at the end of this presentation that I've got you all on my team. that you're all on my side about how and why psychedelics need to be more accessible for people. But good for you for being here to come learn about this. That's such an important part of our work at TheraPsil. The other thing to keep in mind, kind of as an overarching thing here, is the parallel to MAID in our work. So, MAID provides a compassionate choice for those facing an unbearable suffering, and acknowledges their autonomy in deciding how to end their lives. But what about those who are living their lives and want to live them fully, even at the end of their journey? Psychedelic therapy offers a profound opportunity for patients experiencing end of life anxiety. It allows them to confront fears, find closure, reconnect with life. And we need to ensure that patients have options both for ending their suffering as well as enhancing their quality of life. So, just as we support MAID, we need to advocate for the integration of psychedelic therapy into compassionate care. And at TheraPsil, we like to call this medical assistance in living. And that is coined by the lady holding the sign right here, who's uh, a proud Winnipegger, actually, Janice Hughes. And we'll get to a little bit more from her in a moment. But that's kind of something to keep in mind with this, as well as this idea of medical assistance in living through psychedelics. So, for a bit of an agenda today, I'll give a brief overview of the legal history, why psilocybin is essential for end of life care and beyond. I'll be keeping these substances to the ones that we work with at TheraPsil. So, this is MDMA and psilocybin. The current access scheme, which is the special access program, how it works and how it doesn't work. We'll share some patient stories, a bit about TheraPsil's mission, our vision, our approach to advocacy and education and training, where Canada stands compared to the rest of the world, and maybe a bit about like the gap between the scientific evidence and the political reality in Canada when it comes to psychedelics. And then, yeah, how to get involved. So practical ways to get involved in the psychedelic space and support this mission. So the next thing I'm going to show you, I think, really represents a lot of what TheraPsil is about. This is a community, grassroots-led psychedelic approach, and this is really exemplified by Janice Hughes, this terminal cancer patient who opted to do psilocybin therapy underground due to the bureaucratic red tape in her way. And Janice couldn't basically find a doctor, a prescriber to support her application. And since then has been on a mission to educate other end-of-life patients about the power of psilocybin and to hopefully motivate our leaders to regulate psychedelics. So this video is from our lobbying initiative 2 years ago in Ottawa.
In terms of the efficacy of psilocybin, all of the solutions we have currently for mental health address the symptoms. Psilocybin gets at the root causes, and this is revolutionary. I do believe that it's going to thoroughly upend psychiatry as it's currently practiced. And here every day, I see Minister Bennett publishing on Instagram messages about mental health and the dire need in mental health. And I just want to scream at her, psilocybin, it's here, it's in front of you. Let's look at it, let's treat it seriously. And maybe there is reason to fast track a little because there is so much need. The need is growing. We know it's growing and expanding every day. I'm passionate.
She certainly is passionate. So first things first, I hope this isn't old hat for you folks, but what is psychedelic therapy, basically? So, oh yeah, and why psychedelics? So we believe that psychedelics mark a paradigm shift in the treatment of mental health. And a big reason for that is the clinical evidence. The science doesn't lie. Phase 3 MAPS clinical trial studies showed that 67% of people were in remission from PTSD after 3 sessions. That's unheard of. And moreover, the famous Johns Hopkins psilocybin trial that showed 80% clinically significant decreases in depression in terminal patients. And this quote here is from Dr. Human Farzan, who's a physician, a palliative care physician, and a trainer at our organization, who believes that what we're advocating for here, psilocybin therapy, could become the standard of care in end-of-life distress. So what is psychedelic therapy? It's not a magic bullet. You don't just take psilocybin and you're better the next day. Patients that are using, I'll use the term psilocybin and psychedelics interchangeably here because TheraPsil does advocate for both, but I'll say psilocybin for the most part because that's the medicine that terminal cancer patients are largely taking for anxiety. So yeah, patients using psilocybin um, are not taking this magic pill. What we're discussing here is the professionally guided use of psilocybin combined with therapy. And we follow careful clinical protocol that stems from research done at Johns Hopkins and MAPS, New York University, and UCLA. Patients lie down and they listen to pre-programmed music. They're encouraged to relax and surrender to the experience and stay with that experience and allow any difficulties to come as they are. Uh, no one really, people might think that psilocybin is all fun and games, but it can be very difficult for people. But there is always careful medical oversight. Uh, and crucially pre and post sessions, or what we call integration sessions, to weave the healing aspects of their psilocybin journey to create lasting change. The bottom line is that psychedelics beget profound change in self-perception, by which one's ordinary experience of self merges with the world. And crucially, it's again highly correlated to positive clinical outcomes. So here's a bit of a legal timeline in Canada. In 1971, psychedelics became scheduled substances in Canada. So this made the possession, the sale of them illegal. However, in 2016, Section 56 of the Canadian Drugs and Substances Act allowed for exemptions for specific medical or scientific use. And in 2020, then Health Minister Patty Hajdu granted the first Section 56 exemption for psilocybin to treat end-of-life anxiety. And that was Thomas Hartle, who we'll talk about in a little bit, but was a TheraPsil patient, someone that we supported. And in 2022, Health Canada amended the Special Access Program to include psychedelics. We'll talk a lot about the Special Access Program in a bit, but this is now a legal program approved by Health Canada, mandated by Health Canada for accessing psychedelics. In 2022, 7 terminal cancer patients launched a charter challenge against Health Canada for infringements of their Section 7 rights, noting that one of those patients is Janice. Presently, right now, today, psychedelic therapy remains very restricted under these bureaucratic programs. Meanwhile, clinical trials and research are ongoing and continue to affirm what we all know in the psychedelic space, which is that they are safe and effective. So what is SAP? Special Access is a program in Canada designed for emergency use of drugs that aren't yet legally available. So this provides access to good manufactured product, GMP psilocybin, in a purified, either naturally derived or synthetic form. It was supposed to cut wait times and standardize them, as some of the patients who were supporting, like Tom Hartle, for example, the first patient to get access, waited hundreds of days just to hear a response for the government. So the program's intended to provide an exceptional and compassionate pathway to drugs that aren't legally available here and those who can't wait for clinical trials or regulatory approvals. Importantly, the criteria are that the patient has to have tried and failed conventional treatments, and they must demonstrate this emergency need. So that's kind of the first issue here is our question as an organization is who decides what counts as an emergency? Why does a federal department like Health Canada get to decide the extent to which a patient's life is an emergency or in life-threatening need? We would say that surely that decision is made between that patient and their healthcare professional. So this is a bit of a timeline, a rough timeline for the Special Access Program use of psilocybin. So again, it's important to note that once a patient's application is submitted, it is assessed without a distinct timeline. So this bureaucrat will ultimately decide whether a patient gets access to psilocybin or not, and there's no mandated time to respond to a patient. But keeping in mind that this is someone who's applying for emergency use, a life-threatening need of using a medicine, and there's no response time that's standardized. That's kind of a problem. So a prescriber will first complete a lengthy SAP form. So this details the patient's entire medical history, including every single past medication, treatment, etc. The application is assessed with no timeline. This considers the patient's specifics and treatment history, and then the bureaucrat decides yes or no. If approved, the patient is granted access to psilocybin. If denied, The reasons are communicated to the prescriber. In the event of a denial, prescribers have the option to appeal this decision, or, as we'll get to again a little bit later, they can hire a lawyer to provide additional information for reconsideration. And in many cases, that's what it takes to get access. Uh, but understanding this process is really vital as we advocate for more accessible treatment options. It seems pretty weird that someone who's in dire need of a medicine would be forced to go through such an onerous process to access a drug that they can get at a store on their street or online from any of these retailers. So the length of time here is a huge problem with special access. There's just like a lack of transparency that is common in every single case. So now that we've seen the policy part, let's talk about some real people who are facing these barriers. So that's Tom Hartle on top, the patient that I mentioned, the first person to use psilocybin legally in Canada. After Tom's Section 56 exemption, so this was the personal exemption scheme in place before SAP, when his exemption ran out after 1 year, which is a whole other thing, weird that you would have a term limit on a terminal cancer patient's medication, Thomas applied to use psilocybin through SAP, but was denied access, the reason being that his doctor had submitted too many requests. So Health Canada recommended that the doctor start a clinical trial instead. The second guy here, this is Simon Saint Laurent. So he's a young man suffering from substance use disorder and depression. He was denied because he had not yet tried ECT, electroconvulsive therapy. The good news is that both Tom and Simon got the support they needed. It just required some intervention, in this case, advocacy. In Simon's case, it was one CBC Radio 1 national story that outlined the situation. And then within 48 hours of so publicly embarrassing Health Canada, he got a call saying that his application had been approved. So I guess that's what it needs. You need to sufficiently embarrass your governing health body to get access to a mushroom in many cases. Uh, but yeah, these are real stories. They highlight like the true challenges that patients face in Canada, and they're not isolated. They illustrate a real broad problem that needs compassionate and immediate action. Patients have to deal with like massive hurdles just to access psychedelic therapy through this special access program. And we see here how Health Canada's criteria for emergency, or the extent to which someone's life is in emergency, makes access really inconsistent. So these are paraphrased examples, but we have seen SAP denials for absolutely absurd reasons. Like the patient is too suicidal. The patient is not suicidal enough. The patient has a good job. They're employed. They can't be that depressed that they need psilocybin therapy. Or this is the one that really kicks me, that the patient has terminal cancer but has lived for several years. So how much are they really in terminal need? Like how much are they really dying? These are questions that are asked on denial letters to patients. Or another one that I really like, the patient maintains good hygiene and so therefore is obviously not depressed enough to access psilocybin. These are absurd reasons to deny people access to a medication. So while cancer patients and people in really severe need are given the runaround by our governing health body or can't find a doctor to support their application, um, recreational use has never been higher in Canada. Like everyone and their grandma is doing psychedelics. And it's a lot of young people as well. So between 2019 and 2023, the Canadian Substance Use Survey shows that the use of psychedelics jumped from 2 to 5.9%, a jump of 1.3 million users in 4 years. And the use of MDMA also surged up 80%. So this is while the number of SAPs, this is legal use of psilocybin, that is the number as of October 2024. So a few months ago, there were 247 approvals. There's a big difference here. Like this many people using psilocybin illegally, and so few people relatively getting the access that they need. And again, I'll put this here that nearly 1/4 of adolescents and young adults had tried a psychedelic in 2023. That's double the rate of older adults. And this was ostensibly the reason why cannabis was legalized in Canada, that we need to keep it out of the hands of young people, but we're not really seeing psilocybin treated in the same way. So, what does this mean for healthcare professionals? So, practitioners should be free to prescribe therapies based on their expertise and free from unnecessary government overreach. So if they're trained enough and they're willing to prescribe psychedelics, why should a bureaucrat get the final say? It's only psilocybin and other psychedelics that are treated to this standard. We need to trust their clinical judgment and empower practitioners. Don't block them. There's a lot that are walking away from this space just because of the hurdles in their way. So that's where TheraPsil comes in. That's where my organization comes in. We advocate and create guidelines and compassionate policies uh, that empower providers to better serve their patients and push for the government to kind of get out of the doctor's room, basically. So I'd like to introduce you to our organization. So we were founded in 2019 by Dr. Bruce Tobin. We are a nonprofit advocacy and training group. We focus on compassionate access to psychedelic therapy. And our kind of calling card, we are dedicated to helping Canadians in medical need access psychedelic therapy with the support of qualified healthcare professionals. We feel that it is our duty and obligation to give patients the option to try alternative treatments such as psilocybin. In many ways, I think that we're a bit of a megaphone for those who can't speak up for themselves. We're not just creating these guidelines, we are really shaking the tree of outdated policies to make sure that every voice is heard and every patient gets the care they deserve. We're advocating for change, and we don't want to see anyone get left behind as they vie for healing and support. So this was kind of the founding idea of TheraPsil. I'll bring it back to the MAID question. So we've enshrined the right to die here in Canada. And unfortunately, the laws surrounding what you can try before you die have not matched the liberalization of MAID. So we've acknowledged this right to die, but surely you also have a right to try something that might help you live a little bit better. Uh, yeah, it seems like such a no-brainer that if you're dying, you should be able to do whatever you want. And surely psilocybin is, well, maybe not do whatever you want, but certainly try any medicine that you want. And psilocybin is a really ripe example of that. These are just a few of the news stories that we've supported here at TheraPsil. So suing the government, we'll get to that in a moment, training healthcare professionals. We've tried to be in the news as much as possible, advocating for our patients over the last few years. So we have helped individual patients gain access through both SAP and Section 56 exemptions. But as I've said, these wins haven't changed the policy. The government continues to pick and choose who deserves access, often with no clear logic and certainly not compassion. So when the government doesn't follow science, when they don't follow compassion, sometimes you need to take things to the courts. And that's what we've done. So Section 7, this enshrines our fundamental rights to life, liberty, and security of person. And the act of denying or restricting access to essential medications like psilocybin directly infringes on patients' fundamental rights. That's kind of the first step of this challenge. Uh, the second part is that it finds similar precedent in other Section 7 cases, notably exemplified by landmark instances in the realm of medical cannabis regulations. Similar cases have effectively paved the way for the legal right to an abortion or safe injection sites. Uh, this case has also been bolstered by the incredible legal team we have here at TheraPsil, which is spearheaded by Paul Lewin, who effectively got Canada legal access to medical cannabis. Really important part of this too is dispelling the misconceptions surrounding psilocybin. This is not a fringe or casual substance, but a substantial medical tool of immense value that's capable of saving lives and improving well-being. I think I should actually make that number one next time I do this presentation. And again, just this issue underscoring the autonomy inherent in medical decisions. This is a sacred bond between a doctor and their patient. So again, the question arises, why is the government dictating medical prescriptions between a qualified physician and their patient? It makes no sense. So these are the things that we're addressing in this charter challenge, which was filed almost 3 years ago and is still mired in the federal courts. As you might expect, the government tends to take a long time. So this is just one more example of a case. So Jody Lance is someone whose case where we see legal intervention is necessary. So Jody's got cluster headaches. These are known as suicide headaches. Um, his chronic pain specialist and many in the field have described cluster pain as the single most painful condition known to humankind. Uh, Jody's on long-term disability. He lost his housing. He considered MAID and was actually a candidate for MAID, and somehow found that psilocybin could help alleviate his cluster pain, kind of miraculously. Uh, and this was in part due to connection to a group called Cluster Busters in the US, which has done a lot of citizen science to show that psilocybin somehow alleviates cluster pain. It's incredible. So Jody had the support of his neurologist and another chronic pain expert, applied legally to use psilocybin through SAP, waited for 6 weeks before he was denied. The reason was that other modalities had not been ruled out and that there wasn't enough evidence for psilocybin to treat his headaches, which is true. There isn't a ton of evidence. So what did we do? We supported Jody in federal court and essentially got a judge to take a look at this in a judicial review. And the judge looked at it and said, I can't believe what I'm hearing. We've got someone who's considering killing themselves because of the pain that they're experiencing every single day. And here is a medicine that can help him. He's got the support of 2 doctors. And then a bureaucrat is looking at basically a DSM and says, this doesn't work for me. So, of course, the case was overturned. And the Health Canada did a U-turn on this. But Jody would not have been able to get legal access if it weren't for legal intervention, if it weren't for the ability to actually pay for a legal team to bring this issue to the courts. But it was a big win. And again, kind of made our governing health body look pretty silly. So I'll get into a bit of the training here at TheraPsil. I promise as well come back to the legal cases. But when we started seeing access for patients happening, as small as they might be in terms of access, we still need people trained to deliver these therapies. So in 2021, we started our training team and committee with a dedicated operations group. We've since trained over 750 practitioners in how to deliver safe and effective psychedelic therapy. We've expanded this to prescribers as well. So we train doctors and nurse practitioners and psychiatrists on about psychedelics, how they can prescribe it using SAP to their patients, get more informed. And more recently, we expanded these offerings to include MDMA assisted therapy. They believe I have a slide here on these 2 offerings. Yeah. So TheraPsil teaches people in psilocybin and MDMA assisted psychotherapy in an intensive program, but then we also teach doctors in a half-day course on how to prescribe it. Really important. And this is, I think, a really cool part about TheraPsil here. We believe, and many in this space believe, that to deliver psychedelic therapies, you ought to have your own experiences with those substances for many reasons, but probably most important is that it's most correlated with positive outcomes. It provides a lot of comfort to a patient to know that their practitioner has also been where they're going with psilocybin. So when we first started this training program in 2021, again, then Minister Patty Hajdu granted exemptions, the same exemptions scheme to 19 practitioners to actually use psilocybin themselves as part of their training, which was huge and we thought would open the door for lots of other people. However, in the 4 years since then, in the 750 plus we've trained, every single one of them has been denied that same, what we hope to be precedent setting right. And over the past 4 years, each of these refusals continues to get more and more sophisticated in terms of its denial reasons, moving away from medical reasons and more into legal jargon, if I can call it that. And these denial letters used to be 2 pages, now they're 12. So why are we fighting so hard for people to not use psychedelics as part of their training? I'd like folks to maybe think about that a little bit. What's the real reason for pushing back against this when the studies are showing how safe and effective it is? This is just a bit of fun for me, honestly. The bad faith shown throughout this process by Health Canada, again, I have lots of friends that work at Health Canada, so please take this with a grain of salt. They know the necessity of experiential sessions for practitioners. Meanwhile, they're taking them to court over the issue and using taxpayer money to fight them on it. It's clear that they know that through these internal emails. This was revealed as part of the discovery process of this case. Psilocybin is safe, effective. It should be a right for practitioners to use in their training. And we see it right here in this email. They hired a team of experts and they know that it's safe and effective. And yet they're still taking people to court. We're still in court over this issue. We know that their expert team agrees. So it's still part of our training program. So yeah, to fight this, we again took them to court. Nick Pope, our lawyer, representing 96 healthcare practitioners, which is now ballooned to like 250, took the government to court. So again, seeking a judge to take a look at this. Let's have not a nameless, faceless bureaucratic group deciding these things. Let's have a judge actually take a look at it again. And if successful, this would grant practitioners Section 56 exemptions, allowing them to, again, like the first 19 in our program, were the legal use of psilocybin as part of their training. It would also address the scarcity of trained practitioners, enabling more individuals to access psilocybin therapy and receive the care that they need. So while we continue to push for this legal access, we've kind of as a side note moved to launch a community-funded clinical trial for healthcare professionals included. So that would potentially give hundreds of practitioners the opportunity to get legal safe access. So I just want to take a moment here because this all sounds pretty shitty, right? Like the potentially life-saving therapy blocked by a slow, unmoving government, while underground and unregulated use of psychedelics skyrockets. Patients are suffering, practitioners are sidelined, and the system doesn't work. However, there is, I think, a lot of silver linings here, and maybe this will turn the positive side to our work and why we do this. So again, one thing that's so cool is that psilocybin is safe. We know that it helps. It saves and extends lives. And this isn't just a crisis here. This is a moment where real change is possible with psychedelics. And we're talking now about what we can do to make that happen. Yes, we can do it through the courts, through suing the government, but a lot of our best work has been done through grassroots community advocacy and just a lot of small heroes coming together. So the first thing is why and how Canada should lead the world in psychedelic therapy. We have a chance to align policy with science here and move forward with what the research already supports, as I've hammered in here a lot. Australia has legalized medical psilocybin and MDMA. In Colorado and Oregon, you can access legal psilocybin. You can fly to Jamaica to do psilocybin therapy. You can fly to Peru and do ayahuasca. All of these things are happening all around the world. We pride ourselves on our healthcare system here in Canada. Why shouldn't psychedelics be a part of our healthcare system? Moreover, according to our poll from 2022, so mind you, that's 3 years ago, 80% of Canadians believe that psychedelic therapy should be legal for people for medical use. And that number, again, swells when you add that it's for terminal illness. Again, that's 2022. We've come a long way. I think that those numbers would be a lot higher today. I'd wager that. Some leaders in Canada have already called for federal institutions to improve access. So in November 2023, a group of senators released a report called, it's kind of ironic, it's called The Time Is Now, because they're criticizing these major departments, so Health Canada, the DND, and Veterans Affairs, for what they called a wait and see approach to psychedelics. We have a veteran and first responder community who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and other mental health issues, and here's this potentially life-affirming, life-saving medicine. In many cases, this would be MDMA for PTSD that's being blocked. And so the Special Joint Committee on MAID also, their report in February 2023, it made 23 recommendations to improve the MAID system. The 9th recommendation was to improve access to psilocybin. The call to action being from these cases to be more research, more access, and less bureaucracy. Unfortunately, not much has happened since this report came out. These reports came out. It's still just as difficult to access psychedelics. But we see here, though, that there are some folks in the government that do notice, that do pay attention to the evidence that continues to compile. So this is a bit of a path forward for us here. in from TheraPsil's perspective. The first is the wellness perspective. So yes, it's super obvious that psychedelics can help people at end of life and people with treatment-resistant conditions like depression, anxiety. But we also believe that psychedelics have immense potential to elevate well-being, overall well-being, help people reconnect with life. Uh, of course, particularly those facing intense mental or physical health challenges, which is why our first priority is to meaningfully support them, people with severe mental and physical health needs. And of course, any conversation about psilocybin cannot move forward without the indigenous knowledge keepers. We work in a westernized medical approach, however, honoring the traditional practices of the original knowledge keepers of these medicines is essential as we move forward. Again, particularly with psilocybin. So a little bit of regulatory reform would be awesome here. So we need to evolve here. And we've written regulations on behalf of our government already called the APMPR, the Access to Psilocybin for Medical Purposes Regulations. These are based on the cannabis regulations. And as a start, we think the role of gatekeeper should lie with the doctor. So this is central in determining the patient's treatment plan. It's not a bureaucratic body that decides who accesses psilocybin and MDMA. It's their healthcare team. So a couple things we could do, uh, make a committee, establish a committee of Indigenous leaders, Black and Indigenous people of color, practitioners, community advocates to guide this policy with the goal to create a framework that respects traditional knowledge, ensures equitable, responsible access, and also just standardize a little bit here. We need to build a safe and consistent foundation for treatment and training protocols. So with TheraPsil, we have a treatment protocol, we have a training protocol, and that's set in stone with our organization. We've worked at it for a long time. Health Canada doesn't mandate any of that for a patient that gets access to psychedelics. It doesn't say the extent to which a patient's practitioner needs to have any training. That's a problem. So we need some standardization of training and treatment, and organizations like ours are ready and waiting to work with Health Canada to ensure that these treatments are delivered delivered equitably, with care and consistency. So a bit of the advocacy part here, like what you can do. If you believe what I've said here, if you know a thing or two about psychedelics, you can advocate for this, whether by telling a friend, telling your family members. I know that when I first got into this space, my parents were like, "Are you serious? Psychedelics?" And then you show them a bit of the evidence, you show some of these stories, you help spread the word, and people get on board. That's really what it takes is grassroots advocacy at this point. Again, everyone's interested. They just need to know about some details. Uh, yeah, so advocate yourself in your communities, with your family, with your friends. Join our community, join a newsletter, train with TheraPsil as a healthcare professional, become certified through an organization like ours to deliver psychedelic therapies. Uh, Support these treatments by telling other healthcare professionals, people in your lives that can act on this and save people's lives with psychedelic therapy. If you're a legal scholar, if you're in the legal profession, maybe reaching out to support a patient's legal application with psychedelic therapies. That really does make a difference. So yeah, I hope that this has been a good blend of the kind of like bad show with Health Canada currently, coupled with sorry, my Apple Watch there, coupled with what you can do, like yeah, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel here, that we can get psychedelics legal and regulated here in Canada, and follow the science and follow compassionate access. So these are a couple links for you folks if you're interested uh, in training, in donating to support the work that we do here at TheraPsil. There's about 4 of us that work at TheraPsil. We're like really small. Uh, or subscribe to our newsletter. We have a monthly newsletter where we talk about what's happening in the psychedelic space. We put on monthly webinars with some real heroes in the psychedelic space, and and leaders. It's just a really great little community that we're building here and have so over the last few years. But it's TheraPsil.ca. The P is silent, but it's therapeutic psilocybin, TheraPsil. So thank you so much for having me. and for letting me talk about this. It's really cool. And I think we have some time now, right? For questions, maybe if I were to stop my screen share.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for the presentation. If anyone in the audience does have questions, you can just pop the questions into the Q&A tab and they should appear for us. Um, so yeah, I was really interested in um, some of the denials that you talked about and some of the reasons for the denials for the special access. Uh, and do you have a sense after engaging with Health Canada, are they doing it because they have some kind of template, some categories, or is it someone in the office is just kind of ideologically opposed to access to these substances? What's your take?
Yeah, so I think like I mentioned the case of the kind of laughable one where the patient was told that because they maintain good hygiene and have a job, that means that they don't meet this level of depression. And to me, that just screams like DSM, like symptoms of depression that like manifest in real life are, yeah, like maybe a lack of hygiene, maybe you don't clean your space as much, maybe you don't maintain a like an intense job or something like that. So to me, like cases like that were clear cut, where it's almost so laughable that we can't believe that it even came back as a denial. So in cases like that, it's like, yeah, that's someone who's following a rubric and stamping a no. Um, there have been some other cases though where it's really hard to believe that the patient would be denied, and that to me is like that's not following the rubric, where there's some sort of like I don't know, some malevolent force happening. I know that sounds a bit conspiratorial, but in the case of Jody, that patient with cluster headaches who I mentioned, who was granted his exemption after a lot of legal hoopla. Jody has had no cluster headaches for the last year, pretty much, since getting his exemption. He wants to continue using psilocybin now this year, and his exemptions run out basically. So he's now being forced to reapply. And we've just been told that he will likely be denied because the government would say, oh, well, psilocybin's not curing you, it's not helping you. You still need to keep taking it. It's not a one size fits all. It's not I take psilocybin once and I'm better forever. There's a lot of nuance there. So in cases like that, I'm like, who would deny this guy his exemption? If he had it once, what's the difference now a year later? So it's not a perfect answer, I realize, but I think it really depends, which again is problematic.
Yeah, it it resonates with the Thomas Hartle example because Hartle had access at one point and then was denied, had to wait a long time at one point, and there didn't seem to be any real like rationale to it.
No, exactly. And with the exemption cases, those were exactly 1 year. You have 1 year of psilocybin use where possessing, consuming, destroying psilocybin, it's not illegal for you. You have an exemption. So Thomas grew his own mushrooms in his garage. And the photo from the National Post article is him showing his mushroom garage, basically, like all of his mushrooms that he made, psilocybin. And it's really strange that then suddenly, one day, now it's illegal for him to possess those mushrooms because his exemptions run out. Meanwhile, he still has terminal cancer. He's still experiencing this existential suffering, this distress. Like those cases, it's like it's so uncompassionate. Like you can't even believe it. Like, yeah, it's just a really weird thing that we do with psilocybin. No other drugs are really treated to that standard.
Yeah. We have a question in the Q&A. If anyone else has a question, make sure to pop it into the Q&A there. So a question from Lauren. What is TheraPsil's position on psilocybin as preventative medicine? Does someone need to really be at the end of their life to access this kind of treatment?
Great question. I touched on this a little bit with the wellness perspective. No, I don't think you need to be at end of life to use psilocybin effectively. No, I mean, I personally believe, and I think it's the position of certainly my colleagues and a lot of our community, that yes, psilocybin can make people feel better in general. It's not just for people with terminal illnesses or with severe mental and physical health conditions. While I would say that our position would be that those should be the first people in line to access it legally. Uh, no, I think psilocybin can make people feel better in general. And I know Paul Stamets, the famous mycologist, he says that psilocybin makes people more compassionate, makes them smarter. I don't know if I would go that far, but I think psilocybin should be available to anyone that wants to use it. It's just that we need to create a system uh, in which doing so is safe and people understand what they're doing. And with some proper medical oversight, it's important. But yeah, you don't need to be at the end of your life to use psilocybin effectively. I don't think.
You mentioned uh, Oregon and Colorado. So these are two places in North America where they have come up with a scheme for regulation. In Oregon, you can access psilocybin wellness centers right now. So on the wellness side of things, is that are those places kind of like legal models for Canada to pursue, or is it a little bit different because our healthcare system is is arranged a little bit differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, my gut reaction is that going to a center to do psilocybin doesn't really seem that cool to me. I know that most of the patients that we support, when they're doing psilocybin therapy, they're doing it in the comfort of their home. They don't want to go to a clinic to do mushrooms. So, in terms of like licensing out specific like wellness centers, I don't really think that's a great model for us to follow. Uh, I don't know what that model, I don't know what the perfect model is for us. But I think, again, if a patient wants to go to a wellness center to do psilocybin, power to them. They should totally be able to do so. But that screams to me like a little bit more of the capitalist side of this space. That it will continue to be inaccessible if you've got to pay a lot of money to go to a clinic and fork over a lot of money to use the psilocybin. Like you should be able to do this where you want, where you feel safe, and where you and your treatment team, your healthcare team, believe that it's best for you. Uh, I don't know what necessarily it looks like here, but I don't think it's necessarily the best model. But it's a model, which is more than we've got.
Yeah. You mentioned that um, the, you also have advocacy or uh, an interest in MDMA. I think at the start
Hmm.
of the presentation. So Australia has legalized MDMA with a prescription from a doctor. There's the clinical trials from MAPS, Lycos now. Uh,
Yeah.
can you say a little bit about uh, the advocacy and kind of legal background that you're approaching MDMA with in Canada?
Sure. Yeah. So again, we really follow clinical evidence here. So when the clinical evidence emerged of the efficacy and safety of MDMA, we realized we have to be able to provide this training to people. And given that SAP permits MDMA applications for post-traumatic stress disorder, we need to be there. We're Canada's psychedelic advocacy organization. So yeah, psilocybin is, I'd say, like, on our logo of TheraPsil, it's a mushroom. It's a mushroom with the heart. So we're really just entering the MDMA space. But again, the efficacy, like the science shows that MDMA works, and that's enough for us. Um, Moreover, it's an emergency medicine for first responders. We've never seen the type of like there's no real treatment for post traumatic stress disorder. And MDMA is a really viable option, and yet it's so inaccessible. It's so expensive. There's a severe lack of understanding about MDMA. I feel like we got to a certain point with psilocybin. It's a little bit easier maybe for people to digest, given that it's a mushroom, it grows from the ground. MDMA has this reputation as a party drug, but all folks really have to do is do a cursory internet search and see how many lives it can save, and it is saving right now. So, yeah, I feel like we're still kind of breaking into the space. The FDA's denial of MDMA for medical use last summer definitely put a dent, I'd say, in, or maybe if there was an arrow pointing upwards for the use of MDMA and the likelihood that it would be kind of in the cultural consciousness for for mental health that maybe took a dip when the FDA did that. We tend to follow a lot of what the FDA does here in Canada. But again, I think that was kind of crappy. They're not really being patient centered or following the evidence. Like this helps people. So why not? Why not give people the option to try it if it helps them? That's my perspective on it.
Yeah. Yeah. In the States, there are some efforts to push right to try laws at state levels too. Uh, so yeah, it's definitely a space where there's a lot of advocacy happening and legal change, I think, right on the horizon. There's a question from Jenna in the Q&A. Here it is. While this is not necessarily a question, I just really appreciated this notion of medical assistance in living. For my MA project, I'm focusing on how Canada is set to implement MAID for those whose mental disorder is the sole underlying medical condition. And specifically, I am focusing on patient perspectives. So this presentation was very informative on various options Canadians should be afforded to either decide to end their life or continue it with these kinds of approaches. So, any responses?
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to hear. I mean, it's a great line. Again, I can't take credit for medical assistance in living. That was Winnipeg's Janice Hughes who came up with that. But it really has come to define a lot of why we do what we do. And to bring it again back to the wellness perspective, yeah, it's psilocybin helps people live better, I think. And that psilocybin to us is medical assistance in living. And we've done some advocacy work to try to get MAID lobby groups like on board with this. Like if you're going to say as your goal that you're all about patient autonomy and choosing your own journey at end of life, what about while you're still alive? Um, this is a big part of patient autonomy. It's been really hard to get through to organizations like that because they have one sole focus. But we think that psilocybin therapy should be a part of any end of life discussions. If a patient is deciding to end their lives, that is their right to do so. But in terms of safeguards, maybe psilocybin therapy should be there as a first option because only one of those, uh, you know, MAID is not reversible. Uh, and psilocybin is a great option to try before. So appreciate your comment. I love the medical assistance in living acronym, MAIL. So maybe we gotta push that one a little bit more out into yeah, the media.
Folks in the audience, if you have questions, we have a few more minutes for questions. And thanks very much for being here today. I have one question in the meantime. So, can you say a little bit more about the Charter Challenge? And it's under Section 7. Were there any other sections that the group considered making an argument under? Because there's so much going on. It's like even just the denial for a certain amount of time, the wait times. Um, uh, maybe other sections could apply. So, can you say a little bit about the thinking there?
As far as I'm afraid I can't actually. I'm not a legal expert. All I really know about our legal case is that it is a Section 7 case, and that we're really following in the exact footsteps of the medical cannabis regulations that came into place after a similar charter challenge. That just denying people access to their medicine is like kind of the baseline. Uh, all of the other parts about psilocybin being efficacious and safe, and that we have similar precedents kind of falls under that. But the baseline is that the sacred bond between a doctor and a patient is being trampled on by these denials.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions in the audience? Last chance, last call for questions. One last question for me. Can you say a little bit about what it's been like doing advocacy with doctors? Because in my mind, doctors are kind of like the last people in some ways I would expect to get on board because a lot of times a lot of doctors have a kind of subtle war on drugs attitude. Drugs are bad, or uh, they're all toxic, etc.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
what have you discovered
Yeah. I
in
mean,
that?
it it's both sides. There's a range. I mean, I'd say in general, the healthcare professionals that we're working with, uh, or trying to work with, doctors tend to be harder to convince of psilocybin's efficacy and safety, and MDMA as well. Uh, yeah, they tend to be kind of the last to come to the table on this issue, and many are hard to reach with this stuff. However, there are some amazing doctors in our community that are just like incredible advocates for psilocybin. But I guess maybe to put it in, like, yeah, for a little story, like I went to the McGill International Palliative Care Congress last year in Montreal in October, and there were several talks over that week on psilocybin for end of life. And I was like, this is great. Like, so many doctors are going to see this. They're going to see the evidence. They're going to hear from patients that are right there in the room with them about how psilocybin has helped them live better at the end of life. But then, still, kind of after the conversations, I heard a lot of humming and hawing. Oh, well, seems to me we need a little bit more evidence. I can't really subscribe to this yet. And I was like, did we not just go to the same talk? Did you not just see how many people at end of life feel better about being at end of life after just doing psilocybin one time? Like, isn't that enough? Isn't that enough for you, for your end of life patients to help them, yeah, alleviate some of their suffering? But I think it just points to how we need to work harder to get to them and meet them where they're at. So while it is hard sometimes to take it in that people aren't on board after seeing all the evidence, uh, we know that it's coming. I mean, the American Psychiatry, get the magazine, they did a whole issue on psychedelics just a few months ago, which was to me like a huge acknowledgement of their place in the mental health space and the health space in general. So we're we're gnawing away. We're getting there. There's some really cool doctors who are already on board. We just need to get more on board. But yeah, it's kind of a never-ending thing.
Well, thanks so much for being here today, and thanks for your presentation. I think if anyone else in the audience wants to follow up, you can reach John at the website links that were posted earlier, or just type in, you know, uh, TheraPsil. I can't say TheraPsil without pronouncing the P. I know you're not supposed to pronounce the P, but I can't say it without pronouncing the P.
It's all good, man. It's all good. Maybe we
Yeah.
shouldn't have called ourselves that.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for all the work that you do and the work that the group is doing. And
No
yeah,
problem.
looking forward to seeing what kinds of advocacy you're working on next.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for having me. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Okay, take care. Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.